opening SEC play this week, and it's a big game against South Carolina. Joey Van Zummeren here with Michael Stamps, as always, to take a look forward to this game against the Gamecocks. Michael, what are your main thoughts heading into this week and what we know about the Tigers after 3 weeks of play?
This is going to be a really interesting game for a lot of reasons, and I feel like the more like glaring red flag team in this matchup is South Carolina, and it doesn't. I mean, the home the home field advantage helps Missouri a lot, and the fact that they have had 3 straight home games like that, that helps, and they have a game under their belt. I believe South Carolina's only real test, not only real test, but they played Virginia Tech in week 1, and it turns out that they suck. So that's not really any sort of indication of how good of a team South Carolina is. And then, give or take some things with Vanderbilt. Obviously, Sellers goes down, and Dylan Stewart does something stupid, but they got smacked and looked bad. So Missouri hasn't gotten smacked and they haven't looked bad yet. So just justifiably give them a bit of the advantage there. A lot of good positional matchups and stuff that we're going to talk about here later on. This has been an interesting game for the social media discourse about what people think. Preseason, this was definitely a game where most people did not think Missouri would be favored or have a chance to win. I feels like that script has completely flipped upside down, and the status of Lenore Sellers obviously does make a difference there. But regardless, it still feels like the feelings about Missouri nationally, which if you ask Eli Drinkwitz doesn't matter. The feelings about Missouri are definitely higher than they were preseason, and obviously a lot of people are a lot lower on South Carolina, especially with the performance they put on the field against Vanderbilt. So should be an interesting game. A lot of interesting social media discourse about this one, but South Carolina is still a good team, and it should be a fun one to watch.
Right, absolutely. I mean, going into last week, we were expecting this to be a ranked matchup at the very least, but also possibly a matchup against a top 10 team, and one where Missouri could really benefit itself by winning. And you had said in our episode last week that unless something goes terribly wrong, both these teams will be ranked. And then South Carolina lost by 24 to Vanderbilt.
I want to take full responsibility for that. Literally the worst case scenario is what happened last Saturday with Sellers. Injury, a little questionable there, and then they looked god awful and got their butt kicked. So I'll take full responsibility for that for anyone who was curious.
I'm sure Shane Beamer would have some words for the bad luck you placed on them. So, yeah, I mean, this was a game going into the season as well that, at least for me, I lumped this game right in with the Texas A&M and Alabama game, as Missouri really needs to win 2 out of the 3 of these. Now it probably shifts a little bit as far as maybe you consider the Auburn game, especially with that one being on the road, and the Oklahoma game right up there as well, for possibly more important than this one against South Carolina. But obviously still, even if they're not ranked, and even if people are down on South Carolina right now, even if momentum is not in their favor, still think this is a really important game, not only because it's a SEC opener, but just because of the opponent, because Missouri didn't beat them last year. And look, I think for entertainment value, I would almost go as far to say as the game against South Carolina for Missouri last year was the best game as far as pure entertainment value. There's definitely the Oklahoma game, but I would pick a game with Brady Cook over Drew Pine, with all due respect. I did think just pure like football wise, the football guys probably like that South Carolina game a little bit more. You had the comeback, but then you also had the comeback from South Carolina. I thought it was fun. Michael, what are your thoughts on just the importance of this game for Missouri?
Well, you changed my mind because I forgot the fact that Drew Pine was at quarterback in that game. Yeah, I mean, I think what we've been saying about this being the first real test, I think that still stands. This still is a very talented South Carolina team, and even if they haven't exactly put the most complete product on the field yet, I mean, you can't deny that they have a lot of talent at a lot of different positions. So I think it still stands, the fact that this is the biggest test that they've seen so far. I mean, you want to get off to a good start in SEC play. It doesn't matter which team in the conference you're playing. South Carolina is still a good resume, boosting win for those who care about the potential of a college football playoff berth. So this is none of the games are a game you can lose if you're trying to make it that far. But a team you're supposed to, favored to beat at home is not, you know, you shouldn't lose. You shouldn't lose at this point. And I don't. That might be a little bit extreme, but if you're taking that route, then that's the case. So yeah, I think that what we've been saying still stands. This is still an important game for momentum. I think it's still really their first big test of the season. I think we're going to talk about Lenore Sellers here soon. He obviously makes a huge difference. I I don't want to say Missouri's defense hasn't been tested yet. I feel like that might be a bit of a slight to Kansas because they put some good stuff out on the field, but this is gonna surely test that group. Ahmad Hardy has been walking over some pretty poor defensive lines. That's gonna change. Missouri's offensive line hasn't had the most elite pass rush to go against yet, so that's obviously going to change very soon. So we said we were going to learn a lot about this team with Kansas, their first early test. I think this is kind of that second checkpoint of the season where we're going to see how some of these units are coming together and where they, stand for the rest of the season.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about what we learned about this team against Louisiana, 52-10 win. To me, one of the first things I wanted to talk about, just because, it felt like every time you looked up and watched this game, Missouri had the ball. And just over the last 7 quarters, so going back to the second quarter of the Kansas game, and that started just an insane run of time of possession for Missouri, because in that second quarter against Kansas had the ball for just 50 some odd seconds, which is just nuts. So going back over those last 7 quarters, Missouri has had the ball for 75 minutes and 27 seconds out of 105 minutes of play. So that's 71%. Just a crazy amount. And time of possession is interesting to me because, yeah, it's something you want to win, but how much can you really control it? And Eli Drinkwitz was asked about this. I believe it was after the Tennessee game in 2023, one game in 2023 where Missouri just had a crazy amount of time of possession. I think it was that Tennessee game, the more I think about it. And he had said, it wasn't an intentional thing going into the game that they wanted to hold the ball forever, because really, like, you want every play to be a touchdown. In ideal world, every play, at least until you have a substantial lead, every drive would be a 5 seconds, because you're scoring an 80-yard touchdown on every single drive. So you're not going to tell guys like, let's grind out 25-yard runs right here on this drive. And it just comes with the flow of the game. But I do think also there is something to be said about the tempo you can get and the control you can have over the game once you're able to establish that. And Missouri has done that really well so far. And Ahmad Hardy has obviously been a really big part of that. And like you said, Michael, if he isn't, he's got to be able to prove it against the SEC as well, because that question still stands. Although I would say we've learned from Ahmad Hardy in the first 3 weeks that he might, if he's not just as good as advertised as we expected him to be, he might be even better. But either way, Ahmad has been a big part of that. And, it just, again, helps you control the game, which was huge in that, forging that comeback against Kansas, to be able to control the narrative there and really force Kansas into not being able to run their offense in the way that they would have liked. And so Eli Drinkwitz was asked about this today on the SEC coaches call. And he had an interesting answer, I thought, of, again, somewhat similar of what he had said of, you don't go into a game trying to win the time of possession battle. Obviously, that's a goal, but you can't really script that or have that as a part of your offensive game plan. Things happen. But he drew back on his experience with Gus Malzahn, obviously, who was known for maybe not quite as much as Chip Kelly was back in the day, but definitely still no huddle, fast-paced offense. And so he talked about that, having that be the root of his offensive knowledge and building his playbook off of that. But then they also have built in the ability to slow it down, having those pre-snap motions, be able to read a defense, and also having a quarterback be able to have that time to read the defense. And so his answer was really just we have the ability to play as fast as we want to, but as slow as we need to at times. And so I thought that was interesting. I thought it's been an interesting part of the Missouri offense so far, and definitely something to watch going forward. Any thoughts there, Michael?
I Eli Drinkwitz said this. I think it was in reference to Matt Zollers in the third and fourth quarter, talking about, someone asked, basically framing a question why he only threw the ball twice, and was kind of just, maybe we want to just get out of there type deal because it was so hot. So I was personally wondering if that actually had something to do with it. I mean, they executed the game plan well right out of the bat on offense, and it made me wonder. It was a predominantly, run the ball right down their throats. It kind of made me wonder if that was part of that too. Just getting getting people breaks and getting them out of there as fast as they can. But outside of that, I don't really have much to add because the offense has been efficient and effective, and they've been able to move the ball down the field in a variety of different ways. And Bo looks really solid, is generally making good decisions when they're doing that hurry up, and he's moving fast. So I don't really have anything to add to that because it's been effective, and once it's not, then I might have something to say.
Right. And with Bo, too, we should mention another important part of this is how efficient they've been on third and fourth down so far. And I thought Bo has especially been really stellar in that area thus far. Speaking about Bo Prabula, I wanted to talk about something you had asked about on this Tuesday press conference. Mike, I'll let you take the stage here because you know better than me just what this pregame process is for Prabula.
You know what? And I don't want to claim to be any sort of expert because I still feel like there's probably more to tap into this, but I can't remember the name of the sideline reporter for the SEC network who was covering the game on Saturday. But, it was already a blowout. And I think it was the beginning of the second quarter, mentions how Bo does this sort of visualization process where he taps in to all five senses to get a feel for the game and for each play. And the example she used was the turf and smelling the turf and smelling the turf pellets. I have to say, I thought that was ridiculous. But I asked some of my friends who have football, like high school football experience, and that's like a thing when it's hot out, is you can smell the turf. So that's news to me. I did not know that, so it sounds a little less crazy now. But in a more serious sense, I did ask Bo about it on Tuesday, and it's more seems more professional than that. It's just I'm going to read through the entire game script, or I'm going to read through the entire practice script, play it through in my head, read it through in my head. So when it comes time to execute, it's like, this is his exact quote. When it comes time to execute, it's not the first time I've done it. It's the second time or the third time he's done it, which again, it sounds kind of insane, but it makes sense at the same time. I can't imagine how much is going on inside the head of a quarterback when it's time to step onto the field for a game or practice, especially in high pressure situations. So if you can visualize this play in your head, and it's not the first time you've done it, and you step onto the field and you know exactly what's going to happen, you're not seeing it for the first time unfold right in front of your eyes. I mean, I'm not a quarterback, never played quarterback, never have claimed to have been a quarterback in my lifetime, but you would have to think that makes sense. So there's definitely some untapped information with whatever Bo Prabula was talking about, but I do think it is a fascinating thing, and let's just roll with won't knock it till we try it, because it seems to be working right now.
You know the show The Rehearsal by Nathan Fielder?
Vaguely, yes.
I think this is exactly what's going on here. I'm not saying Bo was inspired by Nathan Fielder, but the whole premise of the show is how can people avoid awkward or dangerous situations by practicing every single aspect of it. So it's a pretty complex. It's more complex than that, but ultimately he ends up like creating a whole like airplane set, and like has he like then the end of the show is him flying a plane because he found a loophole in the certifications for to get a plane license. But that's neither here nor there with this. But the whole premise of the show again is recreating those scenarios so you can practice them exactly, and that's exactly what Bo Perbula is doing. And interesting to hear the details as far as smelling turf pellets. And he said today in an interview that he blasts crowd noise in his AirPods, which I thought was interesting. So, I think the more common man's version of it would probably be like for some people that get nervous when they like have to order at McDonald's, imagining having that conversation in their head. But I guess another way to do it, would be recreating a McDonald's and, hiring fake workers. That's at least what Nathan Fielder does on this show. So maybe Bo is teasing a collaboration with Nathan Fielder. That'd actually be a great idea.
I think at the bare minimum we have to put a spoiler warning on this episode because you did just spoil the end of this TV show. So
that we're going to get pilot's license. we can only hope. Okay, that's Poe. One last thing on this Missouri team before we turn the focus to South Carolina. Eli Drinkwitz was asked this Tuesday about what's going on at right guard between Tristan Wilson and Curtis Pegler, because I had asked him about it after that game against Louisiana. If you missed it, in the middle of the game especially, they had Tristan Wilson rotating pretty often with Curtis Pegler. At one point, it was every other drive. And I want to pull up the snap counts for this game because it did end up Curtis Pegler definitely played more snaps than Tristan Wilson. Curtis got the same amount as every other starter. But Tristan Wilson then also, once the backups were going in, filled in at center. He had 24 snaps at center. Tristan Wilson overall had 50% of the snaps on the day. That wasn't 50% at right guard and 50%, that wasn't 50% of at right guard because, again, he had the snaps at center as well. So it seemed like, though, when I asked Drinkwitz about it after the game, that it was kind of this game was going to be a blowout no matter what. We wanted to see what we had at right guard, especially for a guy like Tristan, who has been near the top of the depth chart all of the offseason. We wanted to see him in game action. That kind of seemed like the end of it. But then Drinkwitz was asked about it on this Tuesday. I couldn't get a 100% understanding from his answer, but he was asked, like, is that going to continue, that rotation at right guard? And he said, yeah, that won't change. So there's, you can go back and listen to the press conference and kind of decide for yourself there. But as we talked about after the game in our post-game reaction, like, we definitely see, Tristan Wilson, at least from our idea, isn't too far off or at the same level as Curtis Pegler. And again, even after rewatching the game, to me at least, there wasn't some huge drop off between Tristan or Curtis, nor some big improvement in the other way around. But my question is, like, if by that's not going to change, he means the rotation is going to continue. What's the end goal with it? At this point, going 4 weeks into a season for a group that seemingly hasn't gelled yet, it seems like communication still isn't all the way there. And who knows? Maybe Tristan Wilson is doing the same in practice and getting time with the ones there as well. And part of the rotation is seeing, does Tristan gel better? Could be part of it there. But again, what's the end goal? He didn't say, like, we're going to try to, again, for just this game. They're not, I can't say I completely understand what the goal is there. Michael, what's your thoughts on that rotation?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I don't have any better of an answer than what you just said, because it is kind of confusing. It's weird because clearly there's a level of comfort in both guys that this coaching staff believes they are both starting caliber players, but at the same time, there's got to be some level of distrust that they can't execute at the level that they're looking for. So it really is confusing. I feel like it's not making anyone's, any of the other four guys on the offensive line, it's not making their lives easier by having a little bit of rotation there, especially if you're looking for communication and you're looking for gelling. I mean, that seems to be into the season now one of the biggest, if not the biggest, storyline in terms of what needs to get better. I mean, obviously there are things here and there, but the offensive line still is not where it needs to be. I talked about it in our post game reaction on Saturday, and maybe I need to go back and watch the game a third time to know who need to pick up on those two sacks that Louisiana recorded. But I mean, the first one was right through the gap with, I can't remember if it was Piegler or Wilson, but it was right through the right guard and right tackle, and it was a completely untouched Jaden Duggar, I believe his name was, and that's not acceptable. The other one was not the right guard or right tackle's fault, but still a communication thing because it was a corner blitz and it was just a completely untouched. So, I think maybe the issue with Wilson and Piegler is something that kind of does shoot off into other positions on the offensive line as we still talk about communication and coming together as one unit and things like that, because we've heard Eli Drinkwitz say he's challenging Connor Tollison, that he still thinks Connor Tollison could be playing better, and that he had the right response against Louisiana, but there's still improvements that need to be made there. I mean, Caden Green and Keegan Trust obviously picked up some national honors and recognition from Pro Football Focus, I believe, but Caden Green didn't have a perfect performance against Louisiana either. So I think it kind of shoots off into everything else. But again, it's a weird situation where, like I said, there's comfort and there's a lack of trust at the same time, which makes no sense. But if you really look into it and analyze it, I mean, I don't think there was a decision more surprising than Curtis Piegler being a starter on the offensive line in week one, unless I'm completely forgetting something. That was probably I don't want to say it's shocking, but it was certainly a surprise, right? So maybe it's not a complete shock that we're still seeing some rotation here, but yeah, I mean, I said a lot of words, but I don't have a perfect answer for what you asked, Joey, because it's a confusing topic, and I don't know. I don't know what the outlook is or what the plan is. Either. Maybe we get an answer this week, but I couldn't tell you.
All right, let's turn the focus to the South Carolina team. Obviously, 2-1 on the season here. The big thing with Lenora Sellers, we are about a little over an hour out from the SEC availability report coming out for this game. As we are filming this, I'm going to go out a limb here and say on Wednesday night at 5 o'clock that Lenora Sellers is going to play Saturday, not only based off of how confident Eli Drinkwitz sounded with it yesterday on Tuesday, but also because of some information that Pete Thamel tweeted earlier today, and then also Shane Beamer had said Tuesday that the most important thing for a player's availability there is practicing on one of or both of Tuesday or Wednesday. After that point, they don't have enough time to get the install. They don't have enough time to get the game plan, especially at quarterback. And Lenore's reportedly practiced today. So to me, that seems to be a pretty good indication of where things stand for him. And it goes without saying how talented Lenora Sellers is and the challenges he presented for this Missouri team last year. The other star on this team is Nick Harper, former 5-star guy. Last year against Missouri, he had 2 receptions for 69 yards. So really explosive guy, just insane intangibles, really. Great speed and size. So he's a challenge. And then obviously at running back, they got Razul Faison, really experienced guy from Utah State who brought it to the buzzer as far as his eligibility to even play for the Gamecocks this year. So that's the surface for where this Gamecocks offense stands at. They have Mike Shula as their offensive coordinator, replacing Dal Loggins, taking over as the head coach at App State. That's the surface level. Before we get to those the issues underlying the South Carolina unit, Michael. Just what are your thoughts on those 3 stars specifically?
I would make the argument that there is like not a more unique football player than Nick Harbor because of his size. I mean, he's 6'5", 235 pounds. So that does not scream wide receiver. It screams tight end or defensive end, which I think he played both. He definitely played on the edge in high school. But so insane size. And if anyone listening is into track and field, he has a personal best of 10.11 in the 100-meter dash. So he competed nationally in high school in track and field, and I believe he runs track for South Carolina and contended at the NCAA championship. So he's 6'5", and he runs a 10-11 100-meter dash. That is beyond unusual. He is a freak athlete, and he's off to a heck of a start so far this season. The football fan in me says super cool. This guy's awesome, but he causes so many mismatch issues for any team he faces, unless he's facing a 6'5" cornerback, which I don't think those exist. So insane mismatch naturally because of his size. If he was playing the tight end, that'd be one thing, but the fact that he plays receiver is another. So really unique player there. Sellers, I feel like a lot of what we've talked about, or a lot of the media questions at least, are about what he does on the ground, and it's justifiable. He's a tank. He breaks a lot of tackles. I think the one play that stands out last year was a potential game-ending sack that would have come from Johnny Walker, and he breaks that tackle. Lenoris breaks that tackle, and maybe I think he goes on to score, if not a big completion. So, he's a dynamic runner. He's fast, but he's powerful. And the accuracy has been a little bit wonky this year, which we're going to get into a second. But he can go off in an instant. So another great player there. And then Rasul Faison, Eli Drinkwitz made fun of him for being old, which is justifiable. He is old, but good blend of power and strength. Another guy I want to throw out there is Oscar Attaway, because they do share snaps at the running back spot. Attaway was one of their guys last season, and I don't think he was super productive. Yeah, only 300 rushing yards last season, so he wasn't their main guy, but he still gets some touches, and honestly is like a very similar player to Faison, maybe not as good, but similar style of running. So two kind of fast bulldozers in the backfield, and Lenoris Sellers that can certainly cause some issues. But I'm really excited to see how Missouri tries to guard Nick Harbor, because it's not very easy. He's a freak athlete with an extremely unique frame. So that'll be an interesting matchup. But yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about Sellers here in a second and what he hasn't done, which is a pretty unique situation. So,
right. I mean, Harbor is just kind of the ultimate mismatch, and I really think a guy that can really dictate what you do on defense, not a situation you want to be in, for sure. And, the South Carolina offense, kind of the story for them, I'd asked Eli Drinkwitz yesterday, with Shula taking over as offense coordinator, Coach Beamer has talked about the fact that there's really not too much actual scheme change that they're making. Some terminology just with Mike taking over, especially because Mike has so much experience in the NFL, which is a different language. And so, I mean, shoot, if Shane Beamer ever wanted a buddy to talk about the cons of having a very successful father as a coach, then Mike Shula is this guy. But they haven't changed much offensively scheme-wise, although Drinkwitz did say he noticed differences in the run game, and also a little bit more as far as designed run stuff for Lenoris. But Drinkwitz also said that could very well just be Lenoris being more comfortable in the offense, which, in the second year as a starter, which would make sense as well. But kind of the same staples, especially the explosive plays, and that's still been working for South Carolina in the early weeks of the season. And I mean, last year against Missouri, South Carolina, Lenoris had 3 completions on 4 attempts of 20 or more yards. So that's where 98 yards of passing came from. Also was really successful in the play action game, going 9 for 10 for 118 yards and 3 touchdowns there against Missouri. And so those explosive plays, though, so far early this season for South Carolina has been kind of, something they can hold a crutch on. But in moments outside of that, especially it seems like once they get out of their scripted plays, opening the first quarter and then the third quarter, they've been one, they've been shooting themselves in the foot, but getting stuck at some points too. Their offensive line has not been great. It's been an issue. They had allowed 5 sacks against Virginia Tech. Also, a number of turnovers. Lenoris has an interception. Luke Doty threw an interception last week. So I think, like, look, on paper, with numbers, like, the South Carolina offense isn't doing terrible right now. But again, they're not executing they're not executing the little moments or the big moments, it seems, really. And so they're really going to be looking to get right in this game against Missouri. Michael, any thoughts on this unit as a whole and what they have going on?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about how talented these players are and what they have done, which is fair, and that's a valid point to bring up because it's, the proof that uh, they can go off at any given moment. They're all good enough to do so. The game for South Carolina that I point my finger at is South Carolina State, which 38-10. They were the 10th best team in the country at the time. Uh, they had beat Virginia Tech the week before. And they win 38-10. So you look at the box score and you're like, yeah, Lenoris did his thing, Faison did his thing. Like, just not the case at all. Sellers has 128 yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 23 rushing yards. He went 11 for 19, so that's not horrible, but you expect him to kind of open it up a little bit, and he played for most of the game as well. So that's a bit of a head scratcher. Faison only 5 carries for 21 yards. Attaway 7 carries for 20 yards, and they gave the ball a lot to some other guy who I'm sure was just a health thing, but still, Faison and Attaway don't really have any of those explosive moments. And I mean, Ahmad Hardy against Louisiana had 250 rushing yards, so I don't know if I fully buy the excuse that it was like a resting thing or whatever. So by default, Nick Harbor doesn't really do anything, and their other star receivers don't really do anything. So that's only 2 offensive touchdowns. Cornerback Vakari Swain is their punt returner. He scores 2 touchdowns there. Then there was a defensive touchdown mixed in there along with a field goal. So 3 defensive/special teams touchdowns, only 2 offensive touchdowns. That against South Carolina State to me is concerning for a variety of reasons, especially when you have the star transfer running back, one of the most unique and talented wide receivers in the country, and a Heisman candidate, preseason All-SEC quarterback in Lenoris Sellers, and you blow them out, but in a lot of ways that's not a super convincing win. So I think the decision making from Sellers has been a little bit iffy at times. Whether that's finding a guy or making a throw, or do I take off? Do I throw the ball? Do I throw out of bounds? Stuff like that. So I think his general decision making has been a little bit weird, and then the offensive line hasn't really done them many favors. It's a talented wide receiver room, so for the box score watchers, don't let that throw you off at all, because Lenoris and the offensive line have just been a little bit shaky, and I think that's led to some just general a dip in production for all those guys. I mean, Nick Harbor is not the only productive receiver on that team. I know Mazio Bennett, I believe his name is, has been very good before, and Donovan Murph and Vandrivius Jacobs are both talented guys that will probably get looks. So, it seems kind of like a ticking time bomb, that it's more of a when, not if, but you can't help but be a little bit skeptical as to why this supposed elite offense has not really touched being elite yet. I mean, I don't have the numbers pulled up off the top of my head, but I don't think they were super impressive against Virginia Tech either. Let's see, I just pulled it up. Yeah, I mean, he had 209 yards as a touchdown, so that's better, but still not this breakout game, kind of like what we saw against Missouri last year. So it's a little bit head scratching, definitely odd, but you can't underestimate them because, like I said initially, they have the talent to kind of explode at any moment. So you got to keep an eye on those guys, but it's definitely weird that they haven't been as productive as we think they could be.
All right, switching gears over to the South Carolina defense here. Obviously, highlights of this team or this unit being Dylan Stewart. And I mean, this for South Carolina as a whole, it's interesting because they definitely lose some key guys that have been with them a while. Defense, they lose Nick Amanwari, the defensive back. Offense, I mean, Raheem Sanders, even though it was a transfer, but they lose those guys. But then, look, Lenora Sellers and Dylan Stewart are the main selling points for this team in this season and the best players. And so, obviously, that's the main thing to watch and really look this again. We've talked plenty about the offensive line through these first 3 weeks, and this is really going to have to be where they have to step up. I would say, Dylan Stewart, though, I think at least you got to feel good that their best pass rusher is on the edge, and you feel more confident with the perimeter than you do with the inside at this point. But definitely still going to be a test. Michael, what are your thoughts on this South Carolina defense here?
Yeah, I don't think we really need to add much about Dylan Stewart because he's really good at football. And that hasn't changed at all recently. One guy that Eli Drinkwitz brought up is Fred Johnson. He's just a really solid excuse me, really solid middle linebacker. Great big tackle guy. He'll probably lead him in tackles this year, but he can drop back in coverage and hit a little bit too. So Fred Johnson's a guy to keep an eye on. Off the top of my head, Jalen Kilgore is still at defensive back. That's a guy that was pretty dominant last year and has been generally the same this year. So another good guy there. And Drinkwitz also mentioned Brian Thomas Jr. Excuse me. Also mentioned Brian Thomas Jr. on the edge, on the opposite side of Dylan Stewart. Off the top of my head, I believe Stewart usually comes off the right and Thomas the other side of the left. So, I mean, like you said, you have to feel confident about both of those matchups against Caden and Keegan Trust. So I feel confident about those. So that'll certainly be something to keep an eye on. One guy that I know they brought in from NC State is Brandon Cisse at cornerback, and he has been solid. He has 2 pass deflections and a forced fumble so far. So, but on the younger end of things at the cornerback position, but he's been really good. So, I mean, it's South Carolina. They pulled a lot of good recruits and they did good in the transfer portal. So, it's a very talented defense. I mean, I scroll down and I there's a lot of guys you recognize. They have. I don't know if you know this, Joey. I feel like we talked about this when we previewed them over the summer. They have Demon Clowney on their team.
Yes.
Which is
we did talk about this.
Yeah, Jadavion's cousin?
Yes.
Hasn't done much. He hasn't done much yet. But he's there, so gotta keep an eye out for him, I guess.
Just on name value alone.
Right. And I will mention one other guy. I said his name earlier, but Vakari Swain is a rotational corner at the moment, but he has been an extremely productive special teams player. And Drinkwitz mentioned that Shane Beamer and special teams are like 2 peas in a pod, and he has multiple special teams touchdowns so far this season. So that's going to be an area we haven't seen any glaring areas or errors on the special teams side of things so far this season. I don't know how many times Connor Wesselman has had to punt this year, but it's not a lot. He's been good when he's had to, but it hasn't been many. So I think if they get into situations where they have to punt, which I'm not calling my shot here, but South Carolina's a little bit better than these last 3 teams, so it wouldn't surprise me if they get into a situation where they have to. But they're going to have to make sure that the punt coverage is the best it's been all season, because I'm not super in touch with my punt returners in the SEC. I'd like to think that Vakari Swain is one of the better ones just because of the number of touchdowns he's recorded so far. So I'll plant that seed as well, because he's a good player, and that could be a guy that they have to watch out for.
Right, absolutely. I mean, on special teams, again, we hear this before every South Carolina game, really, of what they can do on special teams on that side of the ball. Obviously, Shane Beamer has experience there, was formerly special teams coordinator at South Carolina back in the day. And then he also has Joe DeCamulus as his special teams coordinator, and Joe has plenty experience as a special teams coordinator in the NFL dating back to 1993. So plenty to watch out for there as far as, both sides of special teams. Drinkwitz had mentioned, I think it was a fake punt, or no, they didn't allow a fake punt, but it was something that they did on special teams, South Carolina, that they were able to take advantage of. So definitely have to be aware on that side of the ball. The one last thing I would mention on the South Carolina defense is that they've had issues with missed tackles so far this year. Right now, they have missed, I just had it pulled up here. They've missed 28 tackles on the season so far. Matt Hardy leads the country in missed tackles force. So I'll let you connect the dots there. But ultimately, I think this is a game that if Missouri wins, it's going to be off of a good defensive performance. Obviously, the offense has to do its job too. And this South Carolina offense, despite its early struggles, is one that I think can put points on the board and can get you in a little bit of a horse race. And so I think, though, the defense, like I've more, even though I think the defense has been the better unit through these first 3 weeks of the season, I would have more interest in just seeing how they are able to answer this test here. And obviously the questions with the Norse and everything else make that even more interesting. So what's just your final thoughts and evaluation of how this game will play out, Michael?
Before I give that thought, I'll throw in a recruiting tidbit, because we haven't talked about that in seemingly forever. Two offensive tackle. I'm sure there's more, but as far as confirmation wise, two offensive tackles visiting this weekend. I'm not sure if they're official or unofficial. But 4-star Johnny Jones from Venice, Florida. He just decommitted from UCLA. And then 3-star Jared Doty from Atlanta recently decommitted from Georgia State. So we saw Missouri swing and miss on a couple offensive tackles early in the class at the end of at the beginning of the summer, and then throughout at the end of last school year as well. So saw them swing and miss on a couple of guys. Obviously, Jackson Cantwell is long gone, so I'm sure people will be upset about that. But Johnny Jones, number 122 player in the country, 9th best offensive tackle. They're competing with some of the best teams in the country to get him, like Florida State, Ole Miss, Florida, Georgia. So, and same thing with Jared Doty. Seems like Auburn and Georgia are two of the teams to keep an eye out for there. So, potential to bring in some big name recruits. I guess if we're talking about it, I believe Aiden Chronister is visiting this weekend as well. A 4-star wing who's been, a Missouri target for quite a long time. So that's another guy to keep an eye on. I told you, Joey, we didn't expect Tony Bryant to commit. And I'm not saying we need to expect Aiden Chronister to commit. By no means am I saying that at all. I have nothing that would make me believe that. But maybe plant the seed in the back of your mind, because if Dennis Gates can do it once in a surprising fashion, then he can certainly do it again. So something to keep an eye on there. To the question you asked me, I don't remember the question you asked me.
Just your final evaluation of the South Carolina game. Yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? No, I feel more confident in Missouri's ability to win this game than I did at the beginning of the season. It's, again, I can't quite put my finger on why South Carolina has struggled a little bit early on in this season, but none of, I mean, obviously losing to Vanderbilt is not convincing in any way, but their Virginia Tech and South Carolina State wins were not convincing whatsoever. And that's not I don't feel like that's outlandish at all, especially South Carolina State. I mean, you win by 28 points, but when your star quarterback only throws for 100-something yards and you need a defensive touchdown and 2 punt returns, if you take those away, which doesn't happen very often, you win by a score. So, or some, maybe, no, that's not true. You win by less, right? So that changes a lot. And obviously those are things that are good about their team, but not a convincing game. So I would say, final evaluation, I feel more confident about Missouri's ability to win now than I did before. And even with Lenoris being healthy and ready to go, I mean, obviously, if Lenoris is out, completely different story, and our conversation would be a lot different today. But even with him in, he hasn't played his best football yet this season, and maybe it happens in week 4. But I'm not saying the signs don't point towards it, but he's going to have to take a pretty significant jump to look better than he has the first 3 weeks. So I'm feeling more confident about this game than I did earlier, I'd say.
All right, that's going to wrap us up today on All Things Mizzou podcast. We appreciate tuning in and hope you do the same for the rest of our coverage throughout the week here.